And we are with signal from the outer world of the YouTube. Sign of life. Something to let me know that I'm Sophia Azran. Sophia. Hi. I still can't hear myself. Can you hear me, Sophia? Bing, bing, biddy, bing, biddy, bing, bing, biddy, biddy. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're live. I can hear myself making weird noises. There's a bit of a delay in the stream. Normal latency. I'm not sure if I set the latency correctly. Welcome. Welcome to the 53rd. Let me just shut myself up. Welcome to the third episode of the Hagwon Startup podcast. The podcast that talks about anything and everything related to South Korea and anything else related, and particularly to the running and owning of Hagwons, language schools here in South Korea, as well as gombubangs, which are smaller versions of a language school, and anything else related to South Korea and living around Asia in the same vicinity, I guess. Today is the 17th of February. I hope everybody had a good weekend, and the weather's been a bit cold, which kind of sucks. I was hoping that spring is coming soon, but that ain't happening yet, it seems. There seems to be a slight delay on the picture again. I was at work and the Wi-Fi connection was quite good, and I came back home and my Wi-Fi here for some reason is not as good as it should be. Not as good as at work. Pardon me. And today, on the 17th of February, I will make a very weak attempt at going over some of Piaget's theories on language development. And the reason why I am doing that is simply because I wasn't able to get another speaker here. And because it's been kind of running around my head for some time, the thought. A couple of weeks ago, actually more weeks ago, Red Burton mentioned the idea that commented here in a section saying that Piaget's theories on language had a large impact on, were very influential in the ESL realms. So I wanted today take some time to have a look at those puppies, review them, revisit them, because I studied them in my psych classes during university, but it's been ages and those theories have been long forgotten. So my goal here today is to kind of rebrief myself possibly, and maybe shed some light for for those who may have been living under a rock for the past century or so. Okay, so the sound is all right on my mobile. The video not so great, but as long as I don't stutter, it's all good. Yeah, fantastic. I think that's okay. I'm still struggling to set up a proper studio here for myself, and it's gonna take some time, particularly with what's been going on. We finally managed. Saying that Piaget's theories on language had. Okay, I don't even know what's making sound now. Okay. So my wife and I managed to finally make the move. We moved over to a much larger facility. We moved our school over to a much larger facility, and I thought on the Living Korea channel. So if you're interested, if you're new here to the channel, if you're visiting for the first time, if you scroll through the feed of all the videos that were posted to the channel, you'll be able to find some that were recorded this week, I believe, and last week. The videos about the new school. There's a new video I posted recent, which is about the move. Let me just close a couple of windows because I'm afraid my computer might not make it through this. Huh. Okay. How is the connection? Okay, a little better, I think. Is it still stuttering? Hi. Yeah, I remember you. You met in Hakuna. Oh, okay, okay. Sangnomu Shigiya. Welcome from Hakuna. Fantastic. Nice to see you here. Uh, so, um, so we managed finally to get everything done. We moved the school over. It's fully operational. Well, not fully, because right now we've just moved over our existing student base, and in March we'll be welcoming a new batch of kindergarten students. And so for those who are following the channel, who are following this whole move and expansion of the Shane English schools of ours, the reason I decided to move to a larger facility is because the Shane English program we have a right now for Korea, a 4-year-long program, which we have not been able to basically implement so far over the past 3 years. But now an opportunity came to move into a facility that would permit us to have larger rooms and more space, and so we decided to just take the chance, jump for it. It's a much bigger operation. It's on a larger scale. There's a lot more rooms, a lot more maintenance, a lot more cost involved, but it's something that we wanted to do. We've been discussing this for some time, for pretty over a year now, and we finally decided to take the leap. And so that's, if you're new here, take a look at some of the videos that I posted over the past few weeks, and you'll be able to see what happened, how that went. And okay, on to today's topic. There is some people in the comment section. Welcome everybody. Today will be, or I'll be attempting at looking at just going briefly over some of Piaget's theories on language development. And for that purpose, I've assembled a very small selected number of articles and presentations. Basically, there are let me just take a quick look here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there are 4 sources that I'll be going to. There are 4 sources, and these sources will be made up of first will be a very brief, simple introduction to the overall theory. Second source will basically reiterate the same thing of the summary. Then there is an article that is a bit more academic, and it will provide us a little bit more depth into the different stages of Piaget's theory. And then another one that may be a little bit broader and a little bit centered around slightly different points of Piaget's theory. I'm not sure if this is happening. There's like severe delay in the production value here, I think. No, it's working. Okay. It's working. It's working. Alright, it's all good. I'm just checking on my mobile to see if it's working, because I have a screen in the back and I seem to have stopped moving. So okay. So like I said, we're gonna start off with a Nito Quito presentation on the Prezi platform. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Prezi, check it out. It's a very cool software. It's free. It's kind of it's similar to a PDF, not PDF, to a PowerPoint, but it's a lot better. Well, it's a lot more fun to use. So this PowerPoint has, I think there are 10 PowerPoint slides, more Prezi slides, and they go briefly over, Piaget's existence and whatnot. So here we go. How children develop language with Jean Piaget. Jean Pablo Hernandez. For those who have been living under rock again, this is the man. So who is Jean Piaget? Born on August 9th of 1896 in Neuchâtel, Switzerland, psychologist and biologist in identified stages of mental development. And just to be clear, this is not my presentation. I did not make this presentation. I was looking through things online, and I came across this beautiful thing that was ready made for me, and it just came in very handy to today's topic. So that's what we're using. So Piaget came up with 4 stages. Piaget separates the language acquisition in 4 stages. There's the sensomotor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. So the sensomotor stage starts at around the age of 2. And the emphasis is on movement and physical reactions. Language skills are basically physical. In the process, the baby hears its parents and learns how to imitate sounds. Examples: opening their fingers, waving their legs. At this stage, this is very early. Kids are basically imitating what their parents are asking. Oh, okay. So I'm just reading Sophia's comment. I guess there was a message and it was retracted. I have no time to read it. But Sophia says, sorry, my sister borrowed my phone. How old is your sister, Sophia? Is she like slandering here on the internet? No problem. This may be quite comical. Like I said, this is my vague attempt at scaling this. I haven't revisited the realm of psychology in many years, so this is it's somewhere embedded in the depths of my brain, but really I'm like an infant when it comes to just looking at it again. Okay, stage, sensory motor stage, it starts from around 2 years old. The second stage is the pre-operational stage, and that's the stage that takes place that are in the years of between 2 and 7 years old. The defining feature is egocentricity. She shows of the possibility that others have a viewpoint of their own. The child describes what he is doing even though you can see what he is doing. So example, when he craves for attention by yelling what he is doing, like I'm jumping. So later on in one of the other articles, it points out that during that stage children may be very noisy for the reason that they are very in their expression of communicate, in their way of communicating, which means that any form of intelligent conversation, or what we would call intelligent, I guess, amongst adults, respectful, is not really present yet with children that age, which there's a lot of chaos, a lot of commotion, and so that's something that teachers need to keep in mind, I guess. Particularly those teaching maybe kindergarten, which is very pertinent to us. So actually this is kind of on topic for me, because reviewing this will, it will allow me kind of to get a better glimpse into the psyche of the younger kids that we will be welcoming to our Shane School pretty soon. I'm just refreshing my browser here, because it ain't happening. Okay, things are looking good. All right, let's go to the third stage. Third stage is the operational stage. This stage takes place between the ages of 7 and 12, and she capable of using logic. Language used to refer to specific or concrete facts, not mental concepts, according to Piaget. Some people stay in this stage for according to Piaget, some people stay in this stage for the remainder of their lives. Specific or concrete, right? Language used to refer to specific or concrete facts, not mental concepts. So I don't know, socially disattached or emotionally unavailable or whatever. I guess it's I don't know. Okay, I don't know. Like I don't even know how to dwell on that thought. Okay, moving on. Example: trying to reason time, emotions, and consciousness. So they don't really. I guess they would have the capability to do that. Yeah, that's the operational stage. That's when children start to develop these abilities to reason time, emotions, and consciousness in depth. Depth of time, Inception style, dream in a dream in a dream. Stage 4. The formal operational stage is the fourth stage. Man, I don't have anything to drink here. I could totally use some water. Pardon me. It's been a while since I've talked so densely. The formal operational stage starts at 12 years old at the earliest, so oftentimes could be later, I guess. Abstract reason and mental distinction between someone's self and an idea he or she is considering. They can use language to express and construct theoretical concepts. Example, explaining complex concepts as time, emotions, and consciousness in depth. So this stage would suggest that attempting to teach debate prior to the age of 12 may actually prove to be very... and so if you're in Korea, for that matter, it might be wise to keep that in mind, since we'd be looking at an age of 13, possibly 14 in some cases, considering that Koreans... the age in Korea is counted differently, and people add 1 or 2 years onto the actual year, depending on when was born, right, and when they went to school. So there you go. Yeah. I'm having some buffering issues here on my other computer, and I don't know if it's because there's just too much happening. Maybe. Okay. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. This is the fourth operational stage, so I believe this may be the end of this short little presentation. Yeah, here we've reached the summit of the mountain, and conclusion, personal opinions. What is the conclusion? Thomas S. Jean Piaget's theory of child. This is probably like an introduction of some of the papers that were written on the topic, and so on and so forth. So this concludes the first excuse me, the first of the four presentation, the 4 articles that we're looking at today. The second article is, again, it's just a read, but by looking at it, I hope that maybe there is going to be some additional info that might shed some light, and just some additional things. We'll go over it briefly and skip over the unnecessary things that may be repetitive. So the 4 stages. The first one, sensory motor period. According to Piaget's theory, children are born with basic action schemas, such as sucking and grasping. Now, Piaget also talked about schemas, and I don't remember what they are. Another article, maybe the second one that's going to be coming up, which is going to be the a bit more intense one. And then the fourth one, the final one, will be just a simplification of everything else, of everything that I've said already. He describes the sensory motor period from birth to 2 years as the time when children use action to assimilate information about the world in his book. About the world. In his book, The Language and Child, Piaget describes 2 functions of children's language, the egocentric and the socialized. During the sensory motor period, children's language is egocentric. So is the first one. They talk either for themselves or for the pleasure of associating anyone who happens to be there with the activity of moment. So egocentric, kind of self-explanatory. A lot of younger children like to talk to themselves, and everything surrounds, everything that happens in an environment is related to them, around the age of 2. Pre-operational stage is the second stage. Again, Piaget observed that during this period, between 2 and 7, children's language makes rapid progress. The development of their mental schemas lets them quickly accommodate new words and situations. So at this stage, I guess children are a lot more adept at learning new words and concepts and new languages. That would be the idea. We don't need this. And single words, for example, milk, they begin to construct simple sentences. For example, mommy, go out. Piaget's theory describes children's language as symbolic, allowing them to vent the here and now and to talk about such things as the past, the future, people, feelings, and events. During this time, children's language often shows instances of what Piaget termed animism and egocentrism. And so I think the lesson that we need to learn period is that if you have students that are 6 or 7 years old, again, in Korean age, we'd be looking at 8 or 9, I guess. You have to keep in mind that expecting kids to make full sentences made in a second language, that is even, maybe way beyond the kid's grasp. And so parents who come, I remember, not to name any names, I don't know people, but has his own website, and he's pretty much out there, and Hal as well. And Stephen Lemlich was talking about the need to instruct his parents or his students' parents what their children may actually be or may not be capable of performing or doing in terms of their linguistic acquisition at a certain age. It seems that a lot of parents were kind of unaware or oblivious to what was actually possible for their child to accomplish at a certain age level in terms of linguistic acquisition. Parents' expectations tend to be a lot higher than reality would. Animism and egocentrism. So here's animism and egocentrism explained. So Piaget termed animism and egocentrism. Okay, what are animism and egocentrism? Animism refers to young children's tendency to consider everything, including inanimate objects. Since they see things purely from their own perspective, children's language also reflects their egocentrism, whereby they phenomena with the same feelings and intentions as their own. Piaget's theory also describes moral realism as a correct children's language development at this stage, since young children tend to focus on the extent of any damage caused by a person's actions without taking on whether that person had good or bad intentions. That's where the childish honesty comes into play, where kids basically just point out, the bad things that people did. Okay, I gotta just quickly check on my phone just to make sure that things are still running, because it's not looking good on either one of the feedbacks that I'm receiving here. And I don't remember what the other article, maybe the second one, that's going to be coming up, which is going to be the... Okay, I guess... a bit more. He describes the sensory motor period from birth to 2 years as information about the world. I guess we're good. Man, oh man. Let me just refresh. Children's language, the egocentric and the socialized. Okay. Well, it's going, not too horribly. So that's egocentrism and animism and egocentrism. Right. Inanimate objects to be alive. I guess this would kind of explain, it goes beyond language, obviously, but this would explain possibly, I've heard people say children say creepy stuff like things are moving or whatever. So this theory would kind of explain some of the things that occasions of kids behaving oddly or whatever. Anyway, the operational period here. Piaget's theory divides this period into two parts: the period of concrete operations, 7 to 11 years old, and the period of formal operations, 11 years to adulthood. According to children's language development, at this stage reveals the movement of their thinking from immature to mature and from illogical to logical. Children's language also reflects their ability to decenter or view things from a perspective other than their own. Up until the age, I guess, the age of 11, Korea possibly 12 or 13, children will be, I guess, maybe perceived as very selfish, and basically view things from their perspective and not be necessarily able to accommodate for the views of other people. So again, teaching things like debate may be quite challenging at this age, and things like role play will definitely be challenging for kids. It might be a lot easier for them to just adopt what's happening to adopt their own, really be able to understand how other people might respond or should respond to their roles in that particular sense. And I think it's also very important to understand this when it comes to class management, and understand that, yeah, work that out. Where are we here? Children's language also reflects their ability to decenter or view things from a perspective other than their own. It is at this point that children's language starts to become socialized, showing characteristics such as questions, answers, criticism, and commands. So questions, answers, criticism, and commands. Particularly, I think criticisms and commands are things that do come in a bit later in life, I guess. Questions and answers become a lot available a lot earlier, obviously. Okay, I think this is it for this particular article. Yep. Okay. All right. Let's go to the third one. The third article, which is the academic one, more academic one, and yeah, I don't know if I want to attempt it. I guess I'm wondering if it's going to be of any benefit. Let me just adjust the width of this puppy here on the screen so it actually fits, because I have some of the text is cut off. It's still cut off. Drink. Okay. This. Okay, I think this is good. Does it work? Yeah, this is good. Okay. Okay, we're in business. Okay, let me take you there. So Article 3, academic article posted on the ISSN, whatever the heck that is. I think it's Journal of Language Teaching and Research. Piaget's egocentrism and language learning, language because blah blah blah. And language differentiation, LE and LD. I am not going to go into, what is that, Chomsky strategy. So okay, I'm not going to go into excessive depth. I'm just going to look at the stages. How are we doing for time there, people? 29 minutes. Is that what's on the clock? Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'm not going to look at it in excessive depth. We'll bypass the Piaget's basic concepts and scroll right the heck down to stage 3. Stage of cognitive development, also not momentarily of interest to us. Oh yeah, it is. Okay, this is a stage of cognitive development. All right, so here it goes. Sensory motor stage, birth to 2 years old. As the name implies, the infant in a sensory motor stage uses senses and motor abilities to understand the world. A baby may suck their feels good, so she sucks some more. The infant's behavior is largely reflexive and undifferentiated. With the infant are sucking, grasping, crying, and moving his arms, trunk, and head. The more sophisticated sucking schema exists differentiation. In addition, a child begins the transition between the sensory motor level of intelligence and representational intelligence in the sense stage. Representation allows a child to find objects that are hidden by invisible displacement, and so on and so forth. Around 1.5, a child is clearly developing the mental representations, ability to hold an image in his mind. 2 years after birth, the child is beginning to talk, has clearly evolved intellectual operations, and is beginning to think. Excuse me. Pre-operational stage, 2 to 7 years old. Can we see that on the screen? Okay, maybe like that. Okay, that's better. All right. During pre-operational development intelligence, a child evolves from a sensory intelligence to a representational intelligence. In this stage, the child is able to use symbols as language. A drawing, a written word, or a spoken word comes to understand it in order to represent a real object. Along with symbolization, there is a clear understanding of past and future. In this stage, obstacles to logical thought are egocentrism, transformational reasoning, reversibility, and conservation. And the terms transformational reasoning and reversibility, I have no idea what they mean. So we know that egocentric, if there's anybody out here listening and you know these terms, that would be fantastic too. But egocentrism basically just the kid being, focused on themselves. Transformational reasoning, I guess, figuring out the ways in which things or objects may change. So if you have a squishy ball and it's round, but then you squash it and it's no longer round, it's still a ball. It's just taken on a different shape. I would imagine that might be transformational reasoning. And reversibility, the idea of just reversing things to their normal state. So if you have a flat ball, a round ball that's been squashed into being flat, and then it jumps back into its original stage, I guess that might be reversibility, but I could be clearly wrong. Like literally, I'm actually curious how wrong I am about this. Conservation, no idea. Keeping things in mind for longer periods of time, kind of like memory. Egocentrism can make different forms at different levels of development, but is always of differentiation in their thoughts. Another characteristic of pre-operational child's thinking is her inability to reason successfully about transformations. The child in the pre-operational stage is not able to mentally the act of lengthening. So I guess if you, the act of lengthening, what does that mean? You lengthen an object, a physical object, or like see what I mean? Like I'm kind of clueless. Okay, let's see before we go to. We'll try later to find out some more terms like the transformational reasoning. The third stage, concrete operations stage, 7 to 11 years old. In this stage, children not only can use symbols, but also can manipulate these symbols logically to solve problems. By 6 or 7 years old, most children develop the ability to conserve number, length, and liquid volume. Conservation means that a quantity remains the same despite changes in appearance of objects. So I guess this would be the famous experiment of taking the water from a wider cylinder and pouring it into a thinner, longer cylinder, which makes it look like there's more water, because the level of water is higher, despite the fact that the amount of water is the same. It's just been placed into a cylinder that is more narrow. Um, In addition, a child learns classification and seriation during this stage. Classification and seriation are important logics to solve the basic arithmetic in a school. The concrete operations stage can be viewed as a transition between pre-logical thought and complete logical thought of older children who have attained formal operation stage. And now we're moving on to formal operation stage, which is D on the list. In this stage, a child constructs the reasoning and logic to solve all problems. Concrete operational children have difficulties in reasoning on complex verbal propositions, hypothetical problems, or the future. Formal operations are characterized by scientific reasoning and hypothetical reasoning, and reflect a highly developed understanding of causation. On the other hand, the operation stage is not accomplished by all children. For instance, several studies have concluded that no more than half the American population develops all the possibilities of formal operation. Furthermore, data from adolescent populations presented that only 30 to 35% of high school seniors approach the formal operations stage. For this paper, authors will focus on young children who are aged from 2 to 7 years old and in their pre-operational stage. Right, so this might be a lot more of interest to us than anybody else. Egocentrism in language learning. So this is pretty in-depth. I'm afraid I haven't read the whole article. I should have had for this podcast, but I haven't, and I'm not going to now because I mean that could take a long time. Okay, I was a little bit too high. Egocentrism can take different forms at different levels of development, but is always characterized by a lack of differentiation in thoughts. Therefore, young children take into account discrepancies between their own knowledge and information of peers in their early cognitive development. Okay. There is a conclusion bit here I was reading earlier. Let me just scroll to that and see what inner characteristics, implications. What are the implications of this theory? Okay, this is synopsis. Implications. Piaget's theory describes cognitive structures in language learning in terms of 4 stages of cognitive development. Yes, we know that. We just read it. In the second pre-operational stage, a child is egocentric in that she lacks differentiation between the self as an object and other objects. In the concrete operational stage and formal operation stage, a child can develop her logical, developing higher levels of logical thinking and reasoning with deteriorating egocentrism. In the language learning, Piaget suggests that egocentrism affects language learning for young children and is an early learning mechanism related to inner or private speech to regulate inner thoughts. Egocentrism is likely to be a critical booster for language learning and is critical factor in the cognitive development with differentiation. Remember when I was learning whatever the heck language I was learning there, German or some other one, I remember that I found a breakthrough. This was like at the age, I guess, maybe 12, 13, something around there, acquiring a new language. And I found that learning German became a lot easier once I was able to mentally make it work. So at one point in acquiring the language, my mind kind of switched gears and I was beginning to think in German, which I found to be the time where speaking in German became a lot easier for me. So this is kind of a tip that I give to my adult students. If people ask me like how can I improve my English, and one of the things I always tell all my adult students is to to take some time each day and just think in English. Take some, like literally 10 minutes, find some time during the day and just force yourself to think in English only. Of your day, doesn't really matter what, but just think in English so that you train your brain to kind of use self-speech, you know, egocentrism of sorts. So egocentrism is likely to be a booster for the early language learning. So it doesn't say anything about ages, but let's assume that it will work with anybody as long as you are an early language learner. In the Piaget's theory, egocentrism can be explained as a critical obstacle that hinders children's logical thoughts. Piaget suggests that egocentrism is related to inner speech. In addition, diverse theories in language theories in language learning have continued to be studied through a wide variety of perspectives, including egocentrism. Therefore, language learning tendencies between what the heck were those again? Language, what is it? Language egocentrism, language differentiation. Okay. Be referred to as a critical multiple mechanism to understand children's language learning. It puts a critical emphasis on the fact that dominant tendencies of language learning between LE and LD can be changeable and flexible in terms of age, gender, personality, and encounter of new knowledge. For example, reemergence and enhancement of egocentrism during the college can be an effective inner mechanism that let them adjust to a new educational environment and achieve a variety of academic knowledge. Basically saying that if you use egocentrism during college, you could basically talking to yourself and viewing things from your own perspective can actually help you learn things. So we can definitely apply that to language learning. Finally, it is required to study the more effective learning methods, such as how to improve LE and blah blah blah. Okay, search. Okay, good. So this is the third paper that I looked at, or third article. And the final one, again, is just a brief summary, and I will just, there are 4 points, I guess. It just talks specifically about the egocentric speech, socialized speech, and then talks about further analysis, which is not necessarily important. It just differentiates between egocentric and socialized speech. So I would like to read that just to clarify exactly what socialized and egocentric speech is, as if we don't know, eh? Okay. Socialized speech. So what is socialized speech? And this is what's the website here. Hello Motherhood. Jean Piaget's theory on child language development. Daisy Blossom Fern Child. Holy moly, that's a mouthful. Okay. Where are we here? Socialized speech in more of a give and take between people in the language and thought of the child. Piaget stated that early language denotes cries of desire. He mentions the word mama as coming from a labial motion having to do with sucking. He attributed his information to Sabina, who was of Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology. Okay, so socialized speech is the give and take between people. That's what it is. Oh wait, egocentric speech. That's where we should have started with. Pardon my lack of French. Egocentric speech can be repetitive. Phrases similar to echolalia or repetition toddler speech. Or it can be a monologue of ideas that requires no listener. A child age 5 to 7 might be heard describing what his toys are doing. His verbalization is similar to the way people who live alone might verbalize their activities. According to an article at Psych Central, talking to yourself as a sign of sanity, it helps you make decisions. Modern psychology texts describe the behavior Piaget observed as parallel play. The Child Development Institute places his being normal for children ages 3 through late kindergarten. Okay, so I don't saw this. I can't remember. I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that I read somewhere in one of those pieces here, one of these articles, that because children between the ages lack socialized speech, the ability to have socialized speech, and they're mainly in the egocentric speech phase, which means that having them follow the teacher and be more coherent in their communication with the teacher and between themselves. You'll have children basically talking to themselves about themselves more time than not, which will be very noisy because you'll have 6 or 7 different kids trying to talk at once. And this is why when the teacher asks a question, you will have one student answering it, another student raising their hand going, teacher, 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 listen to me, because they're not really able to have